Signs of the Southland, Tuesday, May 30th. A little late recording this week because the NCAA Golf Championship is on, the men's golf championship. That is, we'll have an update on Tech's position in a bit. But for now, let's start with introducing our guest, Tony Altimore. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, doing great. Glad to be here with the Ramblin' Wreck crew.
Absolutely. Give us, just tell us a little bit about your background to warm up here.
Sure. My regular life, I do strategy consulting work, mostly for companies, also do some higher ed work and a lot of work with student groups, universities and stuff like that, kind of as a kind of almost a small sub business as well. And during the whole conference realignment stuff, really found that a lot of media outlets didn't understand the business of higher education and sports. They just understood what was sort of going on the field. And so I started working with a lot of media outlets and stuff like that on helping them better understand what was going on with realignment issues and higher education issues. And from that, now help host some shows with the Voice of College football team. And great to be here. And for background, I'm a USC and Penn grad, so fight on Trojans and go Quakers.
Fantastic. Well, so let's sort of kickstart our discussion. For those that don't know, in October we did a series called Engineering a Program, where we talked through sort of Georgia Tech's financial situation, historic situation, a bunch of these contextual factors that has turned Georgia Tech into the program, the athletic program that it is today. And so we felt like it would be best to bring Tony along, since he's doing a lot of stuff in this space and talking about higher education strategy. So why don't we set the table with some numbers just to get an idea of where Georgia Tech is right now in terms of their finances. They're sitting on approximately $278 million of athletic debt. That puts them at sixth worst in the FBS. They have a $105 million budget, around $106 million in terms of fiscal year 22. About a third of that comes from the media. Out of the FBS schools, they have the 13th smallest budget allocation towards athletics, which actually puts them in the same neighborhood as Michigan. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit. And their debt service, I think that's something we harped a lot on when we did our original readout. It's around $13 million, if you remember. That is actually middle of the pack in the FBS as well. So just to kickstart the discussion, Tony, I know we talked a little bit before we started recording about some of the factors that sort of how Georgia Tech fits into this national narrative of athletic strategy and athletic spending. We talked about some of the factors that have gotten Georgia Tech to the place where it is. Make the case for why is Georgia Tech, at least from the outsider's perspective, why is Georgia Tech in the place where it is right now?
So I would say one of the really sort of scary things about your financial situation, different than a lot of schools, is that if you look at everybody that has more debt than you has done a recent like mega project, like I don't even know what it was, $1 billion, whatever the crazy amount of money that Cal spent to rebuild their stadium to be like seismic pieces that shift because they built it on top of a fault line, or the huge new stadium at San Diego State, or the complete rebuild of Sun Devil Stadium, all the stuff that Illinois has done. The problem is that you guys have all of the same debt they do, but your stadium project was what, like 2 decades ago?
And the next one's coming.
I will say I put a chart in the chat earlier because we were talking about capacity utilization. Your boy has attendance figures spilling out of his computer left and right. And I started it from 03 for a reason, because that is the completion date of our Upper North, which, and Akshay, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I think is fairly characterized amongst our fans as essentially a large white elephant that does not get used. Suites are great. We needed more suite capacity. Georgia Tech is notorious for utilizing those pretty well, but that Upper North, it just sits there and it's an albatross. And, we rebuilt the basketball stadium. That's 10 years ago now. Baseball stadium was done more recently, but from a separate project raised. But really, it's the Upper North. It's the basketball stadium and associated basketball arena and associated works there in about 2011, 2012. And they also rebuilt the tennis facilities and the track there from scratch right around the time that they were doing McCamish. Of note, this is an aside for our listeners. Outdoor at Ken Byers Tennis only has 10 courts. You need 12 to host a regional. So we spent a lot of money that we can't even do the biggest ticket items with. And I feel like that's kind of similar to the conversation that we're having now, right? It's somewhat albatross-ish. We're not filling it. We're not using it to put maybe the potential that we could get there.
Well, and the problem is you still have the same amount of debt as somebody who's built it like brand new.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
And I'll tell you, and this is a bigger question, and it has to do with because you guys have your state regents and all that kind of control everything and are kind of a unique system. But it's at least a unique system that is very supportive of athletics and supportive of its big, powerful schools.
Yeah,
more so than many.
We're not one of those.
More so than many.
That's fair. I'll agree with. But I mean, the state power structure in the state of Georgia, independent of the board of regents, all the way up to the state government, has essentially been well publicized in being a funnel.
Red and black.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of just how it goes. It's kind of how it's always been. Georgia Tech had originally its own separate board of trustees until about I'm going to blank on the year. I should know it off the top of my head, but
30s,
late 20s, early 30s, tied into some rejiggering of who got what program. Essentially, they said Georgia Tech having a commerce school, which was Georgia Tech's business school, but they couldn't call it a business school because you can't have the same programs that are offered in Athens, yada, yada, yada. State legislature, we're going to move the commerce school to Athens. Now they have two business schools, spin the commerce school back off. Now that's Georgia State. So there's a lot of government involved, even if it's more friendly than other places. It's certainly more friendly to our friends up the road, about 70.
Up the road. Well, but the thing is that I think you guys really, and this is above any of our pay grades, obviously.
Oh yeah.
But the school, and as part of your capital campaign or whatever, I think the school needs to may want to consider some form of assistance to better help alleviate the albatross of these debt payments that are hurting your athletic department, but at the same time, they're really old, and it's almost like you kind of have to say, okay, well, we took too much. I mean, so Cal has recently done that in making a very large subsidy of their athletic department for a lot of the same reasons, being like, you know what, the stadium cost a fortune. We had to do it because it was historic and it's on a stupid earthquake fault. So, I mean, they could have built 5 stadiums for the cost of what they spent. And so they're giving the athletic department $30 million a year. The interesting thing we found when we looked at your data is if you look at, your athletic department gets a subsidy from the school of about $11 million a year, but you're pumping in through the tuition transfer payments. We won't get into the boring aspects of accounting as to why they do that, but your athletic department is still contributing way more to the school in terms of tuition for both your scholarship and your walk-on athletes than they're getting from the school. So there is room for the school to say, I mean, even if they weren't like, we're going to wipe off the debt, the school could increase the subsidy and it would still be in the black.
The problem is that's a poison pill to the vast majority of the student body, despite Georgia Tech generally being at least amiable.
Or you could do something like stop charging your athletic department so much in tuition transfer pricing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's where there are CPAs angrily typing in the comments as I say that. Whatever mechanism would be necessary to do something like that. There is just a lot of money going back and forth that if the school were to be a little more cognizant of the debt issue, could be helpful. Because the other thing is your football spending is actually pretty low. And one of the things that I would worry about looking at your overall spending is the question of, like, is your football spending, like, if we look at the whole model of how the world's changing right now, that spending may have to go up. We may move towards an employee model. We may move towards whatever. And do you guys have the financial flexibility to do that? Right now, you probably don't.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why the most evergreen topic on this here podcast is when will tech add women's soccer? Because they need to, from a Title IX perspective, they need more women athletes represented amongst, the offerings. And I mean, when you're that far in debt, it kind of is how it is. I have one question before we get too far away from it. You looked at the annualized payment, right? The 12.9 million in debt service. Does your data source look at any of maybe historical is impossible, but some of the forward-looking things? And Akshay, I think you can probably anticipate where I'm going with this. There are like poison pill size payments that keep getting restructured in the tech debt. Does that play into your analytics at all? Or
I don't have the details on your debt. So I have the stuff that I was using for this was from the Knight Commission because they pull great data. So, but yeah, like you guys probably have some balloon payments, and if you look at how they've been doing that, like they've been restructured. If you look at the thing, you guys are incredibly in debt. You're almost like a 2008 homeowner or whatever. Like you're incredibly in debt, but you're not paying it off.
Yeah.
Is the problem. And so like you look at everyone else, and that's why if you look at the debt, you're like, I don't know, on that list, you're like fourth most in debt, but you're like very average in your debt payments.
Yeah.
So again, you just sort of keep paying, like you're just paying the interest on that albatross of a stadium. Now, the thing of it being Georgia Tech, being a public school, and I don't know how they do it, if it's off the school's credit, if it's off tax exempt bond. But the thing about it is for a lot of colleges, when you look at the debt, it's not necessarily a bad thing because giant colleges can borrow money essentially for free.
Yeah.
So it's a really financially advantageous thing a lot of times for universities to borrow money, and it's not like a company because they just the interest is so low because it's backed by the school, which is backed by the state, which is so there are some financial advantages to doing that. But for you guys, there's probably a lot of questions because you're not paying it off.
Yeah, so I quickly pulled up the latest financial statement from the Georgia Tech Athletic Association. I see a couple of things. I'm doing this extremely off the cuff. I did not prepare for this.
Well, and this, by the way, this is their financial statements as opposed to the standardized filing. So the numbers may be a little different.
Yeah. So, and they sometimes won't list some of the things that I think I'll go over. The Athletic Association has an unsecured revolving line of credit in the amount of $12 million with a regional bank. Line of credit is due on demand. Line matures in January of 25. There was an $11 million balance outstanding on the line of credit in June of 22. There's a couple of loans listed here. I think I'd have to scroll a little bit to figure out exactly what exactly where they are coming from, but I can say for sure that the largest one is $163 million that has principal payments ranging from around $2 million to around $11 million, beginning October 24 to October through October 50.
So those are going to go up high.
Yeah. So you are looking at a lot of different styles of debt, a lot of different bonds as well. I'm scrolling because I know that they have a proper.
Well, you guys did that. You guys did a whole awesome column about it that broke it down, and I found it fascinating just looking at that. Yeah, you guys are a little different than most, and it's also interesting. And again, this may be structured, Georgia. I'm not familiar with exactly how it goes, but like a lot of these athletic departments, they sort of, like UCLA is the shadiest. They borrow like from the school, and the school charges interest. It's a whole shady operation. But like it sort of gets lumped in a little more with the school itself. And with you guys, it seems like it's pretty independent.
Yeah. And that stems from long history of the Alumni Association and the Athletic Association being and research as well being very separated out bodies.
And do you guys find, and this, I mean, I don't know, exactly the details of your situation, but there are a lot of schools too that are still sort of digging out from frantic COVID financing that came from, for example, in the Pac-12, that only did they have like a year and a half or 2 years of like no fans or a year of no fans, a year of half the games, so half the TV, and then they made it worse by only having like, I think it was, I don't know, 20%, whatever the percentage you could have the stadium full was. It was all bad. And so as a result, like their financials and a lot of those schools were really messed up, and they just racked it up in various forms of debt and stuff like that. So a lot of our athletic programs are still, I think, moving it back to a state of normalcy financially.
I mean, I know that number has gotten bigger. Wasn't it in the 230s previously, Akshay?
That number?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of different numbers. Obviously there's one listed in the NCAA report. There's one listed, probably the Night Commission probably has their own report. And then obviously the financial statements, there's like, it just depends on which one you want to use it for.
They're all a little different.
Yeah. So let's use this as a benchmark. The number that I see in the financial statement from June 30th, 2022 is $277 million.
Okay. Yeah. And that's about pretty close. So that's, I mean, it's a lot. It puts you up there. Like I said, it puts you up there with everybody who's done recent new stadiums. One of the other things with some of these schools is that some of them are just giant schools. They have huge cash flows. I mean, Cal is a beast, for example. So you look at Cal and you're just like, okay, 400, that's a ridiculous number, but like Cal can handle it.
They've got like 1,000 athletes there. Like it's a massive program that.
And not only that, but just the school budget itself is unbelievable, and it's even before you count the med school. So, which is not technically theirs. It's complicated. All that, but exactly. And so it's just a different thing. You guys are kind of very middle of the road. You have a lot of debt because the other thing with your stadium too. Like San Diego State, they just built a new stadium. They spent a fortune on it. Yeah. But it is the stadium of San Diego. So like the MLS team is going to play there, and the concert, Jimmy Buffett was there and all that. With Bobby Dodd Stadium, you're one of many stadiums in Atlanta, and you're not generating constant stadium revenue just from the stadium.
No, our other events that have happened, they did a Liga MX friendly this past summer. I think Guns N' Roses was the last scheduled concert, and that was supposed to be April 2020. So
there were supposed to be two in 2020. It was going to be BTS and Guns N' Roses, right?
That's right. Yeah, BTS was the other band that was going to come here, and then before that, it was Rolling Stones, but that was like 2011. Like it was ages ago.
Well, Atlanta United played half a season there, and
that's true.
It was they played a game or two every year, but they just they just don't make it work.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is now with Mercedes Stadium,
that's a nice venue.
Yeah, so it's like
they get beat out just because that thing exists right there. If we play in there, we make use of it, but that's not drawing.
Which is dumb, but that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother subject.
I think we've beat that one to death over the years, but I think this is a good segue, right? Like we're sort of talking about how the stadium doesn't have non-game day revenues, and we've noted a couple of things in terms of other ways that the stadium can make money or has made money in the past. And I think one of the things that we should also note here is the recent conversion of the field to turf. That has allowed, less
stuff to happen.
It allows more stuff to happen and less maintenance. But on the subject,
but that hasn't come to fruition the way we thought it would either.
Not yet.
It has not. No. But the ability is there. Right, I think it
was a big first step that had to happen because otherwise we're going to be redoing the grass every 5 months if we just had to lose tons of time just from that.
So, the way that I want to go with this is we talked about the stadium not making money. Let's shift a little bit over to talk about the major revenue programs and how those affect the budget and how these expenses work as well. Tony, I know when we were preparing for this, you talked a little bit about the cash flow probability, methodology that you have. Would you explain that a little bit for us?
Sure. So a couple of years ago, back in 2019, my sort of small firm, we were working on a project or something else, and had a question of we're trying to really think about how athletic departments generate money and what would be a better way to compare them. And we came up with this sort of, it's not the best term, but call it cash flow profitability to support the rest of the department. So it kind of essentially it's a formula that takes a lot of different inputs from a lot of different places and tries to estimate if the football and basketball teams, which are really all of the revenue generators. In fact, you can make an argument it should just be football, but really football and basketball were independent. How much profit would they be throwing off to the rest of the department? Because essentially everything else loses money. I mean, I know, some people go to baseball games or hockey at some state schools and stuff like that. But in general, this is and we've walked through with some athletic department officials on this before, and they love it. They find it fascinating because it's a pretty good look at how much profit really your football and basketball programs are throwing off, again, to support the whole rest of the department. And for you guys, and I'm pulling it up to really quick right there. For you guys, I was really surprised it was a much smaller number than I expected. And I guess that, part of that is because your football team has not been doing well, your basketball team has not been stellar. And so, you're not putting butts in seats, which generates money. And, the ACC TV contract is okay. It's not the Big Ten or SEC, but it's not as atrocious as, like, for example, a lot of the folks are saying on TV. But this comes out to estimate that you guys are about 45 million in profits that are thrown off to support the rest of the department. You also have, by the way, a very, and I imagine the debt is part of the reason, but you have a very overhead heavy athletic budget as well.
Yeah.
But that puts you guys at about, by 3/4 of the way, you're at like the 25th percentile or something. So, here on this chart, you're between Utah, NC State, Virginia Tech, Arizona, UCLA. Not good. Not awful, but not good enough to really throw cash off then to just pay down your debt and support your other sports.
So just to give us a little bit more context, I know you mentioned NC State. Where does the rest of the ACC stack up in that metric as well, just for a comparison?
Yeah, so you are. So this does not include private schools because we don't have all the data from them. They don't file a lot of it. There now for Notre Dame and USC, I know enough about their athletic departments that I was able to just add them in. So Notre Dame is one of the highest, behind Ohio State and Texas, up with Michigan and Texas A&M. Their football and basketball make it a fortune, mostly football. Then, you come down a ways, you've got, the USCs, the Oklahomas, the Auburns, the Illinois. Then you get to the ACC, the regular ACC, you get Clemson is kind of at about the 50% mark, because, your TV contract isn't great, but they're filling their stadium. Then Louisville, Miami, North Carolina, Florida State. You're not far behind Florida State. It goes Arizona State, Florida State, Utah, Georgia Tech. So you're not great, but again, it's not Rutgers or Wazoo or Oregon State where it's a real problem number. And this number I think is really telling because you look at what's going on with Washington State, for example. I'm sure you guys have heard the Pac-12 had an issue where Comcast was overpaying them, so they have to pay it. Yeah. So Wazoo's going to be, for example, on the hook for about $5 million. That's really annoying for USC, but that's really hard for Wazoo. So, for example, in this metric, USC is at about 80 million. Washington State, who's having these budget issues, is at 25. So 5 million is easier to find when you're throwing off 80 million than it is when you're throwing off 25. And again, you guys are at 45.
So one of the things that comes to mind for that, especially when you're speaking about this to other athletic department officials, how does finding that money in the couch cushions come to manifest? Is that conference realignment and openly seeking it? Is that cutting sports, God forbid? Like, what solutions do they see to account not only for that, let's say that Wazoo $5 million shortfall, but take Tech's $45 million to like Clemson's $70 million.
It's butts in seats. Quite honestly, it's how do you make more money? I know this is easier to say than it is to actually do, right? But like, how do you make more money to support the rest of the department? And now there's a couple ways, and by the way, you can task, every sport, so athletic fundraising helps a lot. A school like you guys, for example, can you bring in donors? That's harder to do at like a MAC school or an SBC school, than it might be, for your school. But just in general, you look at every way you can increase the top line, I think is a huge benefit. And then, at the bottom line, are there things you can cut? And that becomes harder, depending on what it is. But I also think one of the other things that you have to make a decision on, and UCLA is always the great example. We did a whole show on the Voice College Football channel about UCLA's dodgy accounting. But just sort of the way that we account for things in college athletics, is a little bit dubious because we're usually overbilling the athletic department. Because it's easier for the athletic department to fundraise, and it's just kind of and a lot of the ways that double entry accounting works, it just is what it is. And that's okay. Like, for example, at USC, it's okay until you have problems and now have to complain about it. And then when you start to be like, okay, we can't keep dealing with this giant debt, or in UCLA's case, we're going to have to cut sports or, whatever. Then you have to really start to look at it and be like, all right, is there money that we are either not getting credit for that we should, or is there money that we are overpaying that we shouldn't? So, and I don't know how you guys do, but for example, at UCLA, parking revenue goes to the Department of Parking for Pauley Pavilion.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that parking money is for basketball. So before you talk about cutting sports, why don't you give the athletic department credit for the parking revenue that they are bringing in?
Goes just to extend that too, especially with the ACC's recent announcement of their performance-based revenue sharing model. How can we sort of politic our way into increasing the amount of revenues that we get because we know that we are a certain level brand in our market?
Exactly. And there's a lot of things like that. So when you look at the actual school thing, now I think a lot of those are going to probably be tied to winning. So I mean, always the best thing you can do is win.
Yeah.
If you win, more people will come. You'll put butts in seats, and it's not always that easy, but it's certainly one of the big drivers of what can move things. The other thing to really look at, and this is something that I believe heavily in, having dealt with athletic fundraising since I was a 18 or 19-year-old student at USC, is that your athletics are used as a tool for fundraising.
Yeah.
So, for example, when you have a big fundraising gala dinner, and there's the filet mignon at the Ritz-Carlton or whatever, that dinner might lose money because it's an auction or whatever it is, you're trying to do the big fundraising thing. In some ways, your athletic programs are being used by the school as part of its giant capital campaigns. Yep. So, for example, UCLA is sitting over there crying poor because a couple of years ago they lost $20 million in their athletic budget. That's by their shady accounting. However, they had fundraising that year of $800 million. How much of that $800 million involved donors schmoozing at the Rose Bowl, at Pauley Pavilion? I'm not saying, again, that money was given to the med school, it was given to the business, it was given to whatever, but you have to recognize that these athletic events are a core part of your fundraising and of your marketing, and so you need to find the money institutionally to keep that successful.
It's the part of the front porch that doesn't get talked about as much too, because usually when you think about that, it's Jake is watching, I'm going to use a real life example. Jake is watching ESPN at 8 p.m. on a fall night in 2015. Oh my goodness, that ME school that's ranked really well just ran the kickback to beat undefeated Florida State. I'm going to apply the next day. That's what you think about when you think of the front porch. And it doesn't sell as much in the, oh, the business school raised XYZ because somebody important was there watching that game too, or just keeping people connected to the institution.
Well, and the other thing, they've done some studies on this, and I've read all kinds of academic studies on this, and they're often torn. Because and this is going to sound really juvenile. I hate to sound like juvenile like this, but it's like, if you're a school that can make that work, then you can make it work, but not everybody can. Yeah. So, for example, at USC, they can make it work. Like they're having, and it's, you're on the sidelines and you're talking to Will Ferrell and George Lucas. You're a rich donor, and George Lucas is schmoozing you with Will Ferrell next to you, and they're doing it up and trying to earn it. There's a lot of schools that look at that and they're like, okay. And if you look in the academic literature, this is why it's so split, is because it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, with for example, the applications thing, that stuff is fascinatingly varies, because one of the things that happens is when you win, your applications go up. But it sounds really mean to say, but like a lot of it is from students that aren't going to get in anyway.
True.
And so
you're not expanding the student access pool.
There's no more dorms getting built instantly because of that.
Yeah. Now, from a ranking standpoint, it's good to have. It sounds really, again, terrible to say, but like if you're trying to improve your rankings, which of course you guys are, it's good to have a higher rejection rate. But the question is this something that can really? Are you trying to build? Are you trying to grow? What are you trying to do with the demographics of the school? One of the other big things, it's a huge issue, and it's going to affect college budgets like crazy. And this is where you look at your debt and it's a potential issue. It probably less affecting Georgia Tech as maybe Georgia State or Georgia Southern. But when the 2008 recession hit, people stopped having babies. So there is a demographic cliff that in 2026 is just about to plunge the number of actual college students. It's already sort of hitting demographically, but 2026 is a cliff.
Huh.
So, for example, USC is twice as big as it was when I was there. Now they're USC, they're gonna do fine.
Yeah.
You're Georgia Tech, you're gonna do fine.
Yeah.
But like, and we're just making this up, right? Where are those kids who weren't born and therefore aren't going to school not going to be going to school?
Illinois
because right
college
now those
is
are
going to get hurt while the University of Illinois is going to be fine, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and you're already seeing it with some Division III colleges and stuff who are already dying because the big schools and the more elite schools have been growing. Exactly. They've been blowing up.
The pie shrinks so they get a bigger literal portion of what's available.
It's already choking those schools. But when we hit that demographic cliff in 2 years, and if you guys follow Scott Galloway, he's a brilliant professor, awesome guy from NYU.
Yep.
I love Jake and I have like the exact same taste in like podcasters and everything. It's awesome. I love it. But and he talks about it a lot. Like there's a cliff coming and it's going to kill these schools. And when it does, there's a lot of athletic departments that are more financially precarious and that are, off. Kennesaw State, for example, who I love Kennesaw State. They're doing awesome stuff, but they have a huge subsidy from the school, which is cool because they can totally afford it. Will that be sustainable? I don't. Kennesaw State, I'm sure they're awesome. They'll find a way to do it because they're really smart and great people. But you look at a huge school, yeah, exactly. They can do it. But some of these schools are going to see their enrollments come off a cliff, may have more struggles for that. And schools, by the way, I also think are going to become less selective, right? Because there's fewer kids to reject. So there's going to be a lot of changes in the demographics, and that's going to affect the finances, which is then going to affect the money being thrown at athletics right at the same time. And we'll probably be hitting massive changes in the overall model of athletics. So, for example, if you guys think about, if you look at the NFL model, I forget now. What do the NFL players get? 48% of revenue?
It's close to, somewhere between 40 and 49.
It's a 50-50 split, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a 50-50 split. So if we just think about what would happen if, say, Georgia Tech athletes were getting 50% of revenue because they went to collective bargaining, you all of a sudden there's a lot of, as the model changes, having a huge debt load becomes concerning.
Yeah, that would
And I guess that's true of any company or person or anything in life. But
yeah, you change your revenue and don't change what has to go out, and that either greatly helps you or does something that you do not want to even think about dealing with. And we've had, I mean, thankfully our AD hire was focused on solving this problem. Like that was
you couldn't have found a much better one.
Yeah, we so far Bat's done well, and just tangentially of people that I've talked with, it's like there's a lot of people that are going to be back in seats this football.
Unless he just happens to decide that you guys are so full of problems, he'd love to come to USC. Call Dr. Fold.
We're just gonna cut that. Actually, probably.
I'm just teasing. Cut that out.
Again, start knocking on wood, Jack. What did I tell you?
I'm just kidding.
But I think that's a good point, Jack, right? Like that's in addition to winning, emphasizing that fundraising, that generating money from your sharks, to use a gambling term, like generating money from your sharks that spend a lot on the expensive seats, the boxes, the fancy drinks at the baseball game or what have you, like making sure that you're able to effectively schmooze them and get the amount of value that you need from them in order to balance your budget is part of the job. And it's part of how Georgia Tech can dig themselves out of this ditch. And Tony, you'd mentioned earlier, like Tech's fundraising is not at the level of any of its academic peers whatsoever, right?
Well, it wasn't as of a couple of years ago. I understand you guys are doing a capital campaign now.
Yeah,
right.
It's called Transforming Tomorrow, a little bit. And yeah,
but I mean the thing is if you can get that stuff back on track, you get your you've got more fundraising. Again, it's when you can get the school right. The other thing I always find with these schools, we talk about a rising tide floats all boats, but it's true of everything in this school. When you get like school leadership that is focused on we're going to do everything is going to be excellent, everything is going to be better. We're going to have, the academics are being better. We're getting better faculty. We're going to win in sports. We're going to have better student life, like all this stuff. It sounds like a campaign ad, but literally everything starts rising and then the donations are rolling in and then there's money for fix the problems, and that brings better students, and all this stuff just keeps snowballing in success.
And that's the thing too, that I think the national media, if you will, to the extent it actually gives Georgia Tech any attention, really misses is that I have great confidence. We talked about Jay Batch just a little bit, but I have great confidence in Dr. Angel Cabrera he seems really awesome. Fall of 2019. I mean, phenomenal human, but also says all the right stuff. And in everything that I've heard from him, from people who talk to him, from things that are conveyed through the organizations that I remain involved with tangentially, be it, folks from the Rumble seat or my involvements in organizations and things like that, he's doing the right things with the right people to get donors aligned and to invest in important things at the school, be they sports or otherwise. And I think that really gets missed when a lot of people just are like, Georgia Tech's in debt and Jeff Collins was bad. Guess they're done forever. Like that's just not the.
And that happened.
Well, it doesn't. I'm adding a very specific podcast right now because they will not let it die. Akshay and Jack, we've talked about this enough times. But I mean, and to tie it back to the original point, I'm not too concerned about that number relatively with the campaign, specifically because that number in 2020, as we discussed before we came on air too, comes from immediately after a big athletics fundraising push that exceeded its goal by $50 million out of a $125 million campaign, which is a pretty significant amount for all Todd Stansbury's now let go faults. Fundraising, he did all right.
That's a good thing.
And it was before the public launch of Transforming Tomorrow, which only came out. Actually, was that last spring? Fall? I don't know. It was very relatively since 2020. And for all that has been put out there, they're a decent chunk into that because, as I've learned since this has been started, they don't start this campaign with $0 in the go. We're gonna raise $2 billion.
No, they got half of it.
All right, Mr. Grant, Mr. Eshwaran, and Mr. Purdy. Do you cut us a check? No, they've got hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank already. So.
Well, and the other thing, quite honestly, and it sounds bad, but we're in Georgia Tech family, so we can talk about this. Is being Georgia Tech, you guys have every advantage in the world. You are an elite AAU school. with generations of old school tech people, wealthy alums. You're in your city that you're in is a market that dreams are made of.
Hey,
There's
5 out of 6 Georgia Tech grads, or no, 6 out of 5 Georgia Tech grads are millionaires or whatever it is these days.
I believe it. I believe. But I mean, if you think about let's give an example of a school that's doing amazing stuff. Boise State. Jeremiah Dickey is a phenomenal AD. He's doing great stuff at Boise State. Mm-hmm. He has to work a whole lot harder than Georgia Tech does to get to level of success.
True.
And so you do have that advantage. And so I'll tell you also, and this is probably a whole other can of worms, I'm sure you guys talk about all the time, but from a realignment standpoint, I don't know of a more Big Ten team in the South than Georgia Tech.
Yes.
But the hard thing, North Carolina probably. But the hard thing is,
sure.
You guys, your program is so far down and not relevant that they need to get it back in gear. If Georgia, the old school Georgia Tech, and it doesn't have to be 1990, but you just even go back not that long ago, that Georgia Tech would be in everyone's realignment dreams right now. And the other thing too with you guys as well, when you think about it, that might be more of a pipe dream, who knows? But there might be opportunities. For example, the idea, as I talk to Pac-12 people, because they deal with Pac-12 people all the time, they look at some of the ideas that people talk about, could we partner the Pac-12 and the ACC?
The Coastal Conference.
But the Cal and the Stanford, they're like, ooh, we love Georgia Tech and North Carolina and Duke. Those schools are schools that we like, that understand us and our DNA.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of potential there. Who knows what it'll be as the world changes, but certainly a lot of opportunity for synergies of very like schools.
Well, and when you say the Big Ten thing, I think a lot of people instantly will roll their eyes. But I say this as a Northerner transplant to Atlanta. There are hundreds of thousands of us. I live with one. In this very house.
Dozens.
Most of my friends from on the swim club side are Northerners transplanted to the South. And that doesn't even count the people who come after college. A place that Akshay and I go probably too often is just casually a Michigan State bar. I could tell you more about oh, that place is a Michigan bar. Oh, that's a Michigan State bar before I could tell you just about any other school other than the boys from Athens and ladies from Athens up the road. It's weird to say it's Big Ten country, but Atlanta just keeps getting put on lists of best place to start a career after school.
Atlanta's it's a great city, and also
whether that's SEC or ACC or Big Ten or really anything. It's a big,
So, but who knows? But I think that for you guys, it's almost helpful if there is a bit of a pause on whatever's happening in the world and keep the ACC locked in together and everything like that. Give you guys a pause for the great things that J-Bot and Unico and everybody are doing to hopefully get you guys in your normal state, I would say.
We do this conversation again in 2 years, maybe even just in 6 months, hopefully, once football's rolling. The outlook is guaranteed to be a little bit different once more Granite rights stuff happens.
Winning solves problems.
Winning solves a lot of problems, Yeah, that's been the thing. The joke was the top 10 list of Brent Key wins was that there was 9.
Jeff Collins.
Brent Collins. Oh, Jesus Christ.
There's only 4 Brent Key wins, which is,
incredibly.
I'll be honest, it's more than I thought there were going to be.
Josh Downs is to thank for that one. But it functionally is going to be very different really soon for hopefully our own reasons, but the outside world seems to be moving at a frantic pace still at the same time.
It is, but the thing is you have every advantage. So if you can harness it, I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah,
and the problem right now is Georgia Tech is not completely bereft of athletic success.
No.
I have qualms with how they presented the every women's team made the NCAA championships in their sport kind of thing, because it includes track and swimming where there's one person that made it kind of thing. But that
literally
that was
both cases one person.
A legitimate thing that happened. Volleyball was in the Elite Eight. But you only sell 12. You sell out every game, but you're only selling 1,200 tickets. You're not moving a needle for a lot of people. Golf is playing right now as we speak in the Final Four
I literally have the tab
Incredible
open
days.
on a second screen right
Yeah,
now.
me too.
Watching the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of
Like,
us do.
but no, like it's not Barrep. It's just the big football, much spilled ink. Men's basketball. I love Josh Pastner as a dude, but he was out. And baseball, obviously the one that's probably the most put together of the three, was famously underperforming with top 10 classes the last decades at this point. Like it's been 17 years since we were in a super. Like
Ouch.
I say in my Matt Wieters t-shirt.
Well, and that's the thing is if they can get some of that back and get and the thing about football and basketball is they have the potential to add to the revenue line.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, enhance, like we talked about, with everything, how do you get everything to snowball? Also enhance the broader fundraising and the front porch aspect and the excitement.
Yeah.
And the thing with Atlanta, and I forgive me because I'm not in Atlanta, but every big city that I've known, when you're winning, it's the place to be.
Yep. That's what
And
happened. Yep.
And when you're not relevant, it's the worst place to be because there's lots of things for everyone else to do.
Yeah. Falcons games attendance has been not great because we haven't made the playoffs since a game I won't talk about. And then when soccer got big here, that was 45,000 routinely every week.
Yeah, I mean, look at that.
Yeah,
people are lining up for random Braves games on a Tuesday because what? They're good, but the Hawks aren't drawn in the same way. The Falcons aren't drawn in the same way. Like it's not everyone could be the Cubs and sell 35,000 seats when it's 35 degrees in April just because your ballpark's a treasure. Like that's just not the reality that most teams play it.
Or Nebraska. So when we were looking at school, we were looking at schools with no. They are the only major school with no debt and no subsidy. They sell out their stadium, and they have been atrocious.
Yep,
especially compared to their expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Compared to their expectations, there's not a word for how much they failed compared to their expectations. But like kudos to them. Like, I mean, you look at great athletic park. They're not sitting with a giant albatross of an empty upper deck in the north end zone.
Yeah, and they just sold 80,000 tickets to a volleyball game this fall. By the way,
how amazing is that?
It's incredible. It's incredible stuff.
Go Huskers!
I think that's great. I think Go Huskers is somehow the best possible place to leave this.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're right.
Thank you, Tony, for your time today. Where can people find you? What are you working on?
You can find me on Twitter at TJ Altimore. It's like Baltimore with no B, TJ Altimore. Or I help host things with the Voice of College Football channel. So this week, for example, we're doing a deep dive into Oregon, which will be really interesting, and do their UFC post games.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. And we will get rolling to our normally scheduled show right after this short break.
This short break is brought to you by Section103.com. Section 103 is the very best place to find Georgia Tech apparel. And even though I'm sadly not in it today, I did have to change things up because I wear the same 4 shirts on our podcasts every week. It is the very best place to find the Georgia Tech stuff for the special Georgia Tech fan in your life, including yourself. Sometimes it's important to treat yourself. If you are going to treat yourself, remember, free shipping on orders over $70 every day. Keep an eye out for new merch. I know that we're at the tail end of baseball season, but for the year, you can always find the Georgia Tech jacket script, as well as the baseball jersey-inspired Tech Zip hoodie, which is quite a highly recommendable piece of merchandise. I say owning one myself. As always, check them out at section103.com and at section103 on Twitter.
Welcome back to Signs of Southland for May 30th. That was a very fun conversation with Mr. Altimore, wouldn't you say, folks? But now, let's talk a little bit about the end of the baseball season. Georgia Tech had one job to make the ACC semifinals. It had to win both of its games. Mr. Purdy, do you want to tell me how that went?
It didn't go. The wrong thing happened both times. Critically, we had to win the first one. That basically did us in because of
after doing 3 wrong things against Virginia too. We didn't give ourselves any leeway for error.
No, yeah, we had to. I mean, just the stakes were you had to win both games, and you did because of how the tiebreakers worked. Losing one basically did us in. And so once we had lost that first game against Virginia was first before North Carolina, right? or whoever, or the other way around. North Carolina was first. Yeah, once we lost to North Carolina, the Virginia game effectively had no standing in the rest of the season, as in
just
the last of the season.
I
just
gotta say, sorry,
contextualize.
Akshay. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to contextualize the tiebreakers for anyone that doesn't remember, the high in any event of a tie in the standings in pool play, the higher seed advances. Tech was the 11th seed; they were the lowest seed in their pool, which means that they had to win both games in order to advance to a semifinal. There you go, Mr. Grant. Please continue.
Yeah, I was out last week taking some much earned personal time. Out of Atlanta, as much as I love this city. And I gotta say, you boys were a little more rosy on baseball than I probably would have been in terms of their postseason chances. Not to rehash that because they are where they are, and I think it's probably best to say we await the official announcement of the summer leagues and potentially draft type prospects. And how do I say? We wish Mr. Burrell, Coach Burrell, all the best. Yes, in how all that shakes out.
Yes, that is also the major news of the end of the baseball season. Danny Burrell has been let go after 4 seasons as Georgia Tech's pitching coach, and Danny Hall has been retained for at least next year. His contract runs until 2025, the end of the 2025 season. Danny Burrell's contract also ran until the end of the 2025 season, but obviously that buyout is being paid out here.
I mean, Danny Hall got the DVC, the dreaded vote of confidence. So I don't know, man. I can't say it's too surprising to see Burrell gone, but we'll see how it plays out. I'm very interested in this hire, but I think we're still some time away from figuring out who the new guy would be, considering regionals are still not even played. Yeah,
Selection Sunday was literally 2 days ago on the baseball side. The softball tournament is going well. It's almost Women's College World Series time, so that's great for them, but obviously not involved in that either. We're definitely stalling for time waiting for the golf results, so let's move on to the NCAA tournament in tennis. Mr. Grant, rapid recap for me, please.
Yes, so we had several players in action at NCAAs. On the women's side, we had Kylie Bilchev and Carol Lee. Kylie played in the first round, lost in 3 sets, 6-4, 7-6, and 6-4 to Ariana Arsenault from Auburn. One thing I noted looking over the recap, because I was unfortunately unable to watch this live, very long weather delay, which certainly hurts. And, clearly it was a very back and forth match.
Didn't they play inside by the time they got to that match?
Just for more podcasting context, this tournament was held in Florida. I believe it was, I think it was in Orlando.
Yeah, USTA Center.
Yeah, so it was in Orlando, and for some godforsaken reason, they tried to play these games outside. They realized very quickly that day, because this was, I believe this was they delayed until basically our recording time that day. They realized very quickly that day that was not going to happen. They pushed all the games back starting at noon and played all of them inside. Bilchev's match did not start until 8:30 p.m. that day. It was a very, very, very long weather delay for her. And that, I'm sure, did not help. Surely.
I will say the USTA Center, that was where we played the nationally televised UGA match a couple of years ago, right? Akshay? Oh, well, I think that's where I don't know. We don't play down there too often, but I'm pretty sure last time we did it was on Tennis Channel. So go figure. Not that it really matters. That's just me being memory lane, if you will. Anyways, more tennis results. We had Cara Lee also playing singles. She won the first round against Mary Metal of UCF in 2 6-4 sets. I believe that was their 3rd matchup of the year. Correct me if I'm wrong there. A lot of familiarity there at the very least. Round of 16 beat Carolyn Ansari of Auburn. Lost the first set 3-6 and then came back to win 7-5, 6-0 So really cleaned up there. And then the quarters lost 6-4, 6-3 to Amelia Rajecki from NC State University. On the men's side, Andres Martin lost in the first round to Michael Braswell of Texas. Texas is a very good tennis program. That was a 6-2, 6-3 loss. And then Martin and Marcus McDaniel in doubles. I mean, this is kind of like the performance we've been waiting for from the men's team all year. They went very deep into the doubles tournament. They won in the first round over a duo from Vanderbilt. In the second round, they won in 2 sets over a duo from Michigan State and then a duo from Michigan in the quarters. They lost in the semis against Texas. I got one comment. Please put the score into recap. Unless I'm blind, boys, and I missed that. I think that would be one nice thing to have, but they did, in fact, lose to Texas in the semis. But great run, really deep run. It's something we've really been waiting to see from the two of them this year.
Yeah, it was especially because I remember seeing that Martin result when we recorded last week, and I was a bit disappointed, especially because it came out that he was the sixth ranked player nationally, like literally the day before the start of the tournament by the ITA. And so to get eliminated in straight sets, granted it's by a player from Texas, is a bit disappointing, but Martin and McDaniel stormed back in the doubles tournament.
They really did. Yeah.
That's obviously got to be respected. And they put together a really, really good performance there. So final tally for Tech in terms of the tennis NCAA tournaments: Carol Lee, quarterfinalist, pretty good, and Marcus McDaniel and Andres Martin, double semifinalist. Honestly,
I think that's definitely better than we would have prognosticated earlier this year. I don't remember.
That's probably better than I would have prognosticated before the tournament started.
Yeah, no, that too. Yeah.
I will say I expected the men to make the team tournament, so I'm not going to let them off altogether there. But in terms of the doubles performance, I mean, getting top 4 in the country, you can't complain about that. And Carol Lee had great performance in the fall too. Can't forget about that. The men went deep in the fall too, I think. Or maybe that was last year, and the years all just started to run together. I feel like Marcus and Andres have been playing at Tech since approximately 2004. But, they've been really good in their time on the flats. So props to them.
Yeah. I think both of them are seniors, right? I don't know if they have more eligibility left.
Andres, I think Andres is a junior, question mark?
There's COVID year in there too. Don't forget
the COVID rule year.
They're still COVIDed up. Yeah, these we're still in debt. We haven't left it yet. We're still there. We're not out of it.
But we are moving on to the next segment and talking about track and field. Mr. Grant, you have the con once again.
Sorry, I was watching the golf hole and I was a little sad. Anyways, track and field. Jameer Gibson, one of Tech's, dare I say, in the young transfer portal era, as it pertains to other sports, one of Tech's best transfers in quite some time, up there, with Ross Steelman, who I was just watching golf, but he qualified on his grad transfer year in 2 events for NCAAs. He was second all time in the men's outdoor. Oh my gosh, was it shot put or discus? Boys, somebody bail me out. Look it up. But in that performance, he got 10th, 18.9 meters. He also qualified for nationals. Like I said, shot put and discus. I forget which result is which. Shame on me. Finishing 12th as well. He's the first double event qualifier since 2009, which interestingly was also in shot put and discus, and that would be Steve Marcelli. So congrats to him for that. And then you also had Zach Yeager qualifying in the 3,000 meter steeplechase. In my personal opinion, track's most interesting event. He finished 9th and came back real quick. I think he got 4th in his heat and went an 8:47.47.
One note, these are, if I understand it correctly, okay, so the men's stuff was the outdoor championships. The women were in the East preliminaries. The Jameer Gibson 55.14 meters mark and 12th overall was in discus. He did qualify for the NCAA, he did Oh, this was also East preliminaries. This is so confusing.
Yeah, they're all East preliminaries, and he qualified in the shot put and the discus. I just can't remember how far each one goes when you throw it.
Discus was 55 meters.
Okay.
So the
That
shot
makes sense.
would have been the other one.
Shot put's real heady. So
Yeah,
so
that's
there you
the
go.
short one.
Also mentioned here, John Watkins in the men's triple jump finished 20th overall. Flipping over to the women's, as I scroll very quickly, we had scroll. Shanti Babakasta in the women's high jump. She finished in 17th with a mark of 1.72 meters. And Helena Lindsay was the second person in the steeplechase to complete this week across all Yellow Jackets. She was in the 3,000 meters and recorded a time of 10:52.65. No place listed there. So I think we have our finalists for NCAAs and Jameer Gibson, and I think you said Zach Traeger.
Yep, Zach Yeager.
Zach Yeager, yeah.
Zach Yeager. I'm thinking of Parks and Rec, unfortunately.
Two guys made it. That's great. I think last year we only had Nicole Fegans, right?
It was just Nicole. Yeah, that was it.
Good. And it's both from the men's side. That changes things up a little bit nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, good transfer portal acquisition and not a revenue sport. There you go. Gentlemen, it's time for the topic du jour, of which all three of us are watching in the background. Well, I guess I don't have the actual stream up.
I'm scoreboard watching this too.
I'm scoreboard watching.
Yeah.
It is time to talk about Georgia Tech men's golf at the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament final. They made it through 3 rounds of stroke play, and that finished up yesterday. Your final tallies for the weekend: Crystal Lamprecht tied for 20th at 6 over. Connor Howe tied for 29th at 4 over. Hiroshi Tai tied for 58th at 10 over. Bartley Forrester tied for 55th at 9 over. You will notice that I left one name out. That is Ross Steelman. And the story with Ross is one of Shakespearean tragedy. He led for almost the entire weekend up until the final 2 holes of individual play. He went bogey, bogey, bogey on his last 3 holes. He dropped 3 strokes on the day to go from 9 under to 6 under and lose the individual title in the last, 30 minutes of play.
Yep.
Basically.
I teed myself up with the Jameer Gibson comment about non-rev transfer portals. Ross Steelman's a transfer from Missouri, right?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's up there too. Certainly up there too. He had a phenomenal individual performance, and golf is a hard game. I say as somebody who's very terrible at it. I am not going to fault him for punching his ticket. Guaranteed starts on the Korn Ferry Tour next year. So that's really good to see. I mean, you missed the Masters berth, which poor guy. That's. Again, a second place is no easy feat either.
All right, so let's move on to the quarterfinals. Tech as a team finished 5th in stroke play, which means that they advanced to the field of 8. So quarterfinals started at noon earlier today. Tech faced off against the 4-seed Pepperdine. Here's how things went. Connor Howe was first up. He took a 2-1 loss. Crystal Lamprecht, another loss, a 4-3. Bartley Forrester picked up the first win, 2-1. Ross Steelman bounced back from his rough individual play ending to pick up a 5-4. Dominating win in that one. A really good bounce back. So it came down to Hiroshi Tai. And it also went to extra holes. And in the end, after 1 extra hole, Tech triumphed. Hiroshi Tai broke the tie, and Tech advanced with a score of 3-2 to face off against number 1 seed North Carolina. That started approximately 4:30 today and is still ongoing. So here are the most recent scores that I can give you. Georgia Tech is up 2-1 at overall. Minotti of UNC took a 6-5 decision over Christo Lamprecht. Christo, really good business decision today. He's tanking for a better draft pick, but I think that's where we'll leave it. Burnett of UNC took a 4-2 loss to Bartley Forrester. Greaser, hell of a name, took a 4-2 loss to Connor Howe. There are 2 matches remaining to decide this. I don't really know what to call it other than a match.
Ford, it's a match. You can call it a match. That's what it is.
Sub matches of a bigger match. It's all squares and rectangles here. Ford of UNC is up 1 on Hiroshi Tai through 14, and Fountain of UNC is down 1 through 14 to the aforementioned Ross Steelman. They just need to win 1.
God. Knock on wood, please.
Just 1.
Please.
Just 1.
The desk is wood. I know what I'm doing.
Just the 1. I'll note from Hiroshi Tai's match, or in the quarterfinal, to win on that 19th hole, him and the guy he was facing, they both hit their second shot. They hit their approach shots in about the same area to the hole, except Tai's was just a few feet closer, but on the same exact line as the Pepperdine guy he was facing. So he got the best read of the day, probably, because it was the exact same putt and just needed to hit it, and he put it center cup in the back. So a lot of that match kind of came down to the fact that the Pepperdine guy just hit the ball in probably the least optimal spot if he was going to be 22 feet away compared to Tai, who was like 14 feet away. So he took advantage of it.
I feel like these greens have been real speedy from what I can tell.
Yeah, they've been pretty fast. Also note that the top line guy for UNC, Minante, was a former Pepperdine guy. So we were going to face that guy no matter what today.
Spicy.
Just an update from the other semifinal. They are into 2 playoff holes in the final pairing between Castillo and Roberts of Florida and FSU, respectively. We were very close to getting an all-ACC final with Florida taking out UVA earlier today. But alas, here we
only
are.
One blue and orange school can make it to the Final Four. Sorry, Illinois. Sorry, UVA. Whoops.
And sorry, Pepperdine.
Yeah, Pepperdine too.
Pepperdine too. Wow. Yeah. I didn't think about that either.
Honestly, we will probably be re-recording this or adding an addendum to this later once this finishes up. But for now, that's where we can leave it. I'm not even going to mention what's next, pending some sort of chaotic result down the stretch here for Kai and Steelman. Let's move on. Let's start wrapping up. Club sports are over. It's the summer. Graduation has happened. Graduation happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
Survivor is also over.
Oh.
Pretty. Talk to me.
Oh, well, Carson got 4th last week in the finale. He was the second one voted, not voted out. He lost in a fire making challenge because that's the basically how you the fourth that's how 4th place is determined with how this game shakes out. He played a really good game. He was he said it himself to me in my interview that he thought he was the most likely guy to win when it came to it. So they got rid of him at the right point, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, we were talking, and then the CBS media lady that was chauffeuring our interview on Zoom was like, "Hey, I gotta cut you off. We got someone that needs to show up and get in the Zoom call." And then Sia showed up, which if it seems weird that Sia would show up on a Survivor virtual interview, is because she's a massive fan. And back when they did live finales for the show, like in Los Angeles, she would show up and give $100,000 to whoever didn't win that was her favorite, that she could tell needed some help, and that just was someone that inspired her. Now she's expanded just to 3 people that get prizes of varying degrees of money, and she came on and gave Carson $15,000 to help pay for school. So, and it will be a recurring gift also, as whenever she can provide it. So, yeah, that's just Sia's way. It's one of Sia's really cool ways of giving back to people that are just normal Joes like us. Then they go play Survivor and have a life-changing experience, but also inspire millions, because I mean that show draws a ton of eyeballs. I saw a thing that for the under 50 demo, it had the highest ratings of any Wednesday night or whatever. It was a very good report of how many eyeballs Survivor is getting in the under 40 demographic, which has helped because of streaming. So yeah, it was really cool. One of the cooler moments I've ever had in my life. We put it on YouTube. I made a YouTube channel for us just so that I could post it. So we have a YouTube channel now, which hopefully will actually start like putting things on. Maybe something from this podcast too.
I noticed that it's now in our conclusion section.
Yes.
Is that our? I'm I'm rusty. It's been like 2 weeks since I've done this.
Yeah, you're gonna have to run through this one with with edits too. So
Yeah.
uh
So, anyways, Jack, you did me a favor on making it at least the same handle as Facebook and Instagram. So I'll start there. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, at From the Rumble Seat. Just spell it out, all one word, all lowercase, all that good stuff. You can find us there. You can find us on Twitter at FTRS Blog. I'm at Jake Grant98. Jack is at Jack Nicholas. You can find Section 103 on Twitter as well. They're awesome. We love them. Go check them out at Section 103 and section103.com. As always, FromTheRumbleSeat.com is the very best place to find all the great stuff we put out as we roll into summer. The 100 days till kickoff have started. It's wild. The previous spring sports aren't even over yet. We got track and field nationals coming up soon too. So keep an eye out for that. We'll keep rolling through the summer here alongside all the written work that we put out on the site. You can email us your suggestions at fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com. Questions, comments, concerns. Just check us out. We appreciate the feedback, and we want to make the content you guys want to hear. You can also comment on the website as well. You can find this podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold, distributed. Rate, review, tell your friends. We really do appreciate it. And as always, good night, good luck, and I mean this as thoroughly as ever. Go Jackets. Go get them, boys, out in Greyhawk.
Sons of the Southland, we're back for an addendum on the golf part of our May 30th episode. Mr.
Woo!
He didn't even let me get through the introduction. I was gonna be all cryptic and
Too exciting.
Yes, Georgia Tech has advanced to the national championship match by a score of 3-2. It took a Herculean effort, honestly, from Ross Steelman, the same Ross Steelman
It really did.
that had a rough go of it on the back 3 holes yesterday. I'm exhausted. That is agonizingly stressful golf. And we're not even the ones that went to extra holes.
No, we weren't. No, Florida State and Florida had to go to 21 holes or something like that. 21, 22 holes.
21 sudden death holes.
That's incredible stuff there. Yeah, so we're facing Florida.
Yes, they will be. Georgia Tech, as the 5 seed, will be facing off against the 2 seed Florida tomorrow, May 31st. So today, when you're hearing this, that is, what is that, a 5 p.m. start?
Yeah, I think 5 p.m. EST, right? So 2 p.m. local time out there in
Arizona. So probably like a 4:35 start time for the actual tournament. The TV coverage will kick on at 5 on the Golf Channel. So we'll get this audio packaged up and to y'all well before then. No real preview here. Not even a really short high level one. Here's some of the scores at least, just so you have an idea of what to expect. Cress lost 3-1 to FSU. Biondi, our old foe Biondi, who edged Steelman for the individual title, was 1-up versus Anderson to take that. He had got absolutely nuked in the quarterfinal, though. He was down significantly. And his team salvaged his poor performance. Dubois for Florida was also 1-up. Lynn lost 6-5 versus Florida, and then Castillo, they pronounce
that's a Castillo, I think.
Yeah, they pronounce his name really weird. Took 21 holes for to beat Roberts of FSU. So we're in for a match. We're in for definitely some match play golf. That's really all I got. I'm like legitimately exhausted.
What I like about this is if Florida keeps their 5 in the same order and Tech keeps their 5 in the same order, which for us I very much assume that we will. Lamprecht and Ty, who both lost matches to UNC, are facing guys that lost their matches to Florida State. So it's obviously you can't go 1-to-1 and comparing that and how they're going to do and predicting everything, but that's at least some semblance of like, okay, they might do a little bit better there, or at least have a better shot here. Although Hiroshi was so close, like he was on 18 green, he had a really really difficult putt to salvage another extra hole like this morning. The left hand side of the green there at Greyhawk just goes down really quickly and cuts. It's kind of hard to read the cut, so I don't blame him for missing the putt necessarily, but
Yeah,
Ross on Steelman's putt on 17 though, like holy crap, that was the thing that not that it saved it, we were winning, but they mentioned on the broadcast no one had birdied from laying up on 17, which he did after UNC's guy almost drove the green, and had just a chip. He just had a chip to make it to get on the green, and he buried a very good like 19-footer. And then UNC's putt there does a 360 around the cup and still goes in. So we were mere inches. I mean, Steelman's had just such an up and down thing. This is where the format, I am grateful, exists as it is, because at least Steelman had a shot to rebound from yesterday and play some insane golf after just barely not pulling out the individual title. And Lord knows what'll happen tomorrow. I know y'all are way more superstitious on this than I am, but I personally, speaking as Jack Purdy,
say
from the
a
Rumble
word. Do not.
I am a confident human being.
Nothing.
I'm confident in myself.
Nothing from you. Nothing. Just to finish a recap here. Ty had a pretty short putt on 17 that would have tied it back up, and it just lipped out. Just took a massive curve hitting the outside of the or the far side of the
hit
cup.
It pretty hard too.
And then similar case on the putt that he had to at least force Ford to make, I think it was make birdie. Or maybe salvage the hole on 18.
Yeah.
Just hooked it wide. So they're playing good golf. The only one that's really kind of biffed it in match play is Christo Lambrecht, who got smoked today.
Yeah, and he shot +6 at the tournament. He did finish the fourth round with a 4 under, so he's shot under par at this tournament, and I put him up that climbed him 27 spots in the final round of the main individual stage. So it's not like he's had a bad run here.
He's had a bit of a howler in match play.
Yeah, it's been a little bit it's been up and down. So I mean, any of these guys just in general have the ability, and this is what Connor Howe said when I talked to them. Like, they feel like they can beat anybody in the country, and the UNC coach afterwards in the post match just now is kind of reiterated the same thing. They are a really strong team that mentally are in the right spot. So I think just seeing these kinds of performances is what you want to see at this specific moment in time. So I'm not predicting anything for tomorrow because I don't know enough about Florida's team or anything like that. I do know that the 9th ranked team in the country, and we're the 11th ranked team in the country. So, once you get that far up, it's and North Carolina was number 2. So we beat the crap out of them in the ACCs, and then beat them again here. So that feels really good.
Just win, baby. Al Davis said best. Just win, baby.
Sure
you got one more. You get to take out an old demon on the way if you do it. Maybe Hepler rolls the dice and puts Biondi on Steelman for the narrative. Who's to say? But this will be the best finish of a Georgia Tech athletic team since the men's basketball national title runner-up or national runner-up in 03. Any way you slice it, it has been
women's tennis title in 04.
Wow, somewhere. That's embarrassing. It was 07.
It's close enough.
That's even more embarrassing to correct me and not get the year right.
Oh, I didn't know the year. I just knew it was somewhere in the odds. Was it
07? Let me assuage myself. The closest the men have gotten to a national title since.
I see. Okay.
As a school since 07. So
okay, yeah.
Anyway,
4s and 7 looks the same.
It's going to be an extremely agonizing afternoon for both of us.
Yes.
Considering that I'm going to watch this. Both of us are going to watch.
We're going to have to find a TV somewhere in the stadium.
They're not going to put it on the stadium. I'm watching it off of a phone. So that's going to be a fun time. Anyway, your broadcast details: 5 p.m. Eastern, Golf Channel, Georgia Tech versus Florida. That is what you said. Number 11, Georgia Tech versus number 9. Number 9?
Yep, number 9, Florida.
So, 18 holes. and maybe plus a couple extra for the national title in men's golf. We'll see you tomorrow.